I was talking to Caleb Calhoun, and all the way back in 2009 when Tennessee hired Lane Kiffin, he said he was an absolutely huge proponent of hiring Brian Kelly at the time. So, had Tennessee hired Brian Kelly, they couldn't the following year when Lane was gone, because at that point, Kelly had continued to establish himself as a solid coach at Cincinnati. So you couldn't just go get him like you could have the year before. Where's Tennessee right now if they would have hired Brian Kelly instead of Lane Kiffin? If you want to play the what if game and fill up our message boards with your thoughts on that, because maybe that should have been today's tough question. But Amanda, I think Brian Kelly is a very solid coach that had some restrictions. For those that don't know, at Notre Dame, you have no say in discipline with your players. That's a university handled issue. You have no say in players being admitted. That's total university. Doesn't matter if you that you might be able to fudge at some other schools and get a guy in that probably shouldn't be in. So you have none of that. So a lot of those guys that Lou Holtz, and Randy Moss is one of those guys that Lou Holtz tried to get in, was not allowed to go to Notre Dame. A lot of those guys are game changer type of players. The flip side, if a kid goes to a Catholic school, you've got an inside with him. Harrison Smith is a great example there in Knoxville. But for the most part, there are a lot of guys that you can't go get in the recruiting pool, Amanda. So where do you rank Brian Kelly among the top coaches in the nation? I mean, it's to me, it's Saban, obviously, and then the next level's what, Smart, and then to me, there's another drop off. Is Brian Kelly in that next group of the Lincoln Rileys of the world?
I haven't seen enough from Brian Kelly. I've seen him at Notre Dame, and you can say, it's hard to recruit there and yada, yada, yada. But Brian Kelly was there when it wasn't really that difficult to recruit at Notre Dame. I mean, there was no NIL, there was no, paying players, there was no any of that. So Notre Dame may be, Catholic and a lot more, I guess, unwilling to hand over uh, the reins to the coaches. But back then, you still had boosters. You still have huge Notre Dame boosters. You had, and I know we're going to say, and I don't care what anybody says, everybody was doing it. Everyone was paying their players under the table. It was all happening. So, and Notre Dame has academic standards, but we know that we see it all the time. People get around that. Anything that anybody else is doing, Notre Dame was doing it too. So I haven't seen enough out of Kelly, especially not with, the teams that Notre Dame played and how they just got destroyed when they would go up against a pretty fierce opponent like Alabama. I haven't seen enough out of Brian Kelly to really know how great he is. I have to see a coach in the SEC and see how he plays there before I can really tell you, oh, he's a great coach, or oh, he's not a great coach. Like, I think Lincoln Riley bolted once Oklahoma was headed to the SEC. And I know it might not have been, it might have just been coincidental timing, but I would have to see more out of Brian Kelly because we're looking at Jimbo Fisher right now and it is not looking pretty. And everybody thought he was one of the best. So
No, we thought Jimbo Fisher was. So let's say there are two tiers that are pretty clear cut, and that would be Saban, the Saban tier, right? He's by himself. The next tier would be Kirby, and I'm going to include Dabo because you've got two guys that have won a championship. Now, I think Dabo's best days are behind him, but we'll see. And then the next tier are to me, the Lincoln Rileys, the Brian Kellys of the world, the guys that have gotten to a college football playoff and haven't been able to complete and win a championship. I will say this: I would rather have Brian Kelly than I would Lincoln Riley or the other coaches in that grouping. if I had to make that hire today, if you told me that you can hire any coach, and this is Hooker University, which Hooker University, yeah, where
Which
we pimp out the scholarships. And so Hooker University, and I can hire anybody I want to, but Nick Saban's not leaving, Dabo's not leaving, and Kirby Smart's not leaving. Brian Kelly's probably at the top of my list. I'm taking him over Lincoln Riley. I'm really racking my brain. Trevor says Josh Heupel. I've got to see more from Josh Heupel. I've got to see him be able to, and we've talked about this, and people have gotten upset with Chris Landry for saying this. He has to prove that they can win games defensively, that they can win games that aren't just shootouts. And he started doing that against Pitt. I get it. But that needs to be more. And he's got to prove that his defense is going to be on the same level as his offense. I think that'll happen eventually, but it's not there yet. Who would you hire? Those three excluded, the three that I mentioned that have won championships.
So out of I think Josh Heupel again. I'm very high on Josh Heupel. I think he's done a lot with very little at Tennessee. He is. I mean, it's not been great. We've all seen. I hate it for you guys, but it was a dumpster fire. It was literally a dumpster fire for the last like 10 years before Heupel got there, even longer. So he's done a lot with a very little, and he's gotten a fan base behind him that's ready to fire coaches after 3 years. Let's not play. So I'm very impressed with what he's been able to do at Tennessee. Now, I would do we have to put morals out there, or can we just throw those to the
That's
side?
so that's what I was thinking. Somebody brought up John Gruden and Urban Meyer.
Urban Meyer or Hugh Freeze? Those would
Oh,
be my
Hugh Freeze.
hires.
Speaking of hookers, um,
It all ties together.
yeah, I would. Okay, Urban Meyer, I don't think's coming back, and it is funny to me that Nebraska and every fan base that needs a new coach because they fired one early in the season to get a head start on somebody thinks Urban Meyer's going to show up and salvage the program. Urban Meyer's not going to go any place that doesn't have a strong in-state talent base, and he's probably not going to go anywhere anyway. Because let's face it, he did what he did at Utah to get to a place like Florida with great talent, won there because talent's in his backyard, and then went to Ohio State, which he had ties to, and they have great talent there in that area. He's not going to go to a Nebraska or Wisconsin and have to recruit as hard as he did at Utah. That you benefit off your credibility through the years. He's just not going to do that. So that to me is the equivalent of when Tennessee fans had the groomers. They wanted John Gruden to show up, which was never going to happen. And
How are we with hookers and groomers? How are we here?
I don't know. We got here talking about the levels of quarterback, levels of coaches, and I think Josh Heupel does deserve to be considered if you want to look at him as far as a young coach with upside. So I think you could make the argument that you have seen what you've seen out of Lincoln Riley, and they're very similar. So maybe you want a young guy like Josh Heupel. I could make that argument. I couldn't make the argument over Brian Kelly because he got Notre Dame to a college football playoff. Now they got hammered by Alabama. But as far as that third tier of coaches, I would have I would have Kelly at the top, and it would not stun me. As a matter of fact, let me ask you this, Amanda. If you had to bet a mortgage payment, does Brian Kelly win a national championship at LSU?
I have to bet
Yes.
a mortgage payment.
Yes.
Do I have a time frame of when he
Nope. Zero time frame. He could coach there 20 years to his 80s.
um I'd take the field. I'd say no.
I would say yes.
You have Texas coming in with
No.
like Oklahoma coming in. I mean, Saban's still here. I don't know how long he'll be here. Josh Heupel's shown a lot of promise at Tennessee if he stays. I mean, Kelly has the talent down there. I want to see what he's able to do with it. But I would take the field on that one. And you have Kirby Smart, Georgia. I'd take the field.
Yeah. Probably the safe bet to take the field. If he coaches there 10 years, let's say 10 years, I would say that he wins a national title at some point.